The topic is on final accounts. It's called final accounts. Final accounts, or what we call the financial statements. Financial statements. So when you're talking about the final accounts or financial statements, it means we are going to tackle three statements. That is one, we are going to tackle what we call the trading account, of which we have already tackled the trading account. Two, we are going to tackle the income statement. Income statement, or we can also call it the profit or loss account. The profit or loss account. In other words, it can be called the statement of income. The statement of income can also be called the statement of income. Then number three, we are going to deal with what we call the statement of financial position. Statement of financial position, or what we call the balance sheet. So this time round we had already tackled the trading account. This time round I want us now to deal with what we call the income statement. And when we talk about the income statement, I have said I'm going to give you a skeleton of or a breakdown of what the income statement is. So the income statement, we are now on number 2. We are dealing with number 2, that is the income statement. And when we talk about the income statement, this one it can also be called the profit or loss account. That is what we call an income statement. So when we talk about the income statement or the profit and loss account, this is what you are going to determine from the income statement. So the income statement, in short, I have abbreviated it as IS. IS meaning income statement. When you're talking about the income statement, you're going to be concerned with two major items. That is, you're going to be concerned with the expenses and then what we call the incomes or revenues, or even what we call the gains. So we are going to deal with these two items. Before you write anything, just wait. The income statement deals with the expenses and the incomes. Out of the expenses and the incomes, once you have dealt with the expenses and the incomes, you are expected to arrive at net results, and this net results is either an income, a profit, is either a net profit or what we call a net loss. So it can either be a profit or a loss. How did you arrive at these net results? The net results are given by the gross income, or the total income or total revenue, you less what we call total expenses. That's what we call total expenses. So when you're talking about the income statement, you are simply talking about what we call the expenses and the incomes. So the expenses and the incomes are accounted for in an account known as nominal account. A nominal account is where you have the expenses or the incomes, or expenses and the incomes. Then out of the expenses and the incomes, you are going to determine what we call the net results, and the net results is either profit or a loss. And this profit or loss, you got to it, or you determine it from the gross income or gross revenue, you less what we call the total expenses. That is now what we call the income statement. You can have it now. Yes, have it the way it is. So you can have it the way it is, and this is simply now what we call the income statement. So from there, I want us to know the features or the format of an income statement. So when we talk about the features or the format of an income statement, is what is contained in an income statement, or what is posted in an income statement. So we are going to prepare what we call an income statement, or before you prepare it, we know what or the format of the income statement. So the format is, you always begin by the name of the business, name of the business, the name of the business. It is followed by the statement that you are preparing, which is called the income statement, the income statement for the year ended. For the year ended. Remember that these final accounts or final financial statements are prepared at the end of the year. So when you're talking about the income statement is prepared for the year ended at the end of the year. Like this year is the year 2024. So in the year 2024, we are having what? We are having the months starting from January to December. So when you're preparing the income statement, you will state the end of that year, and the end of that year is as for the year ended 31st December 2024. So with the current CASNEB requirement is that you are required to prepare your income statement using the vertical format. And using the vertical format, it means you're going to have the shillings on the currency columns, only two currency columns. The first are the two currency columns, the first two currency columns, and the two currency columns. Here you are going to post, here is where you are going to do your collection or your summation of items. Then you are going to post the balances here, of which you are going to do the total of the balances. So I have said it is majorly concerned with the expenses and the incomes. So with the expenses and the incomes, you always begin with the gross results. So if you have the gross results, the first item to post here is gross profit, the gross profit or loss. Are we together? So the first item is the gross profit or the gross loss, and that gross profit or loss is posted there. So if it is a profit, it is open. If it is a loss, it is in brackets. So the income statement, you always begin with the gross profit or the gross results, and this one comes from the trading account. It always comes from the trading account. This one you get it from the trading account. Then you are supposed to add any gain. So add any gain, add any gain. So if there was any gain, it's supposed to be added. So the gains, you're supposed to add them there. And this is either again or revenue or what we call an income. You're supposed to add them. So you're supposed to add them. So after adding the gain or revenue, you are supposed now to less. You are supposed to less all expenses. So the next thing you are supposed to do is less. Before you less, get the total of the profit or loss plus the gain. So if you get the total here, if it is a gain, you post it there, and if it is a loss, you also post it there. So you can either get a gross income or a gross loss. So here you have a gross results, and these gross results, from the gross results, now you are going to less. If it is an income, if it is a loss, you are going to less what we call the expenses. So less all expenses. So the next thing you are supposed to do here, you are supposed to less all your expenses. You less your expenses, less expenses, and these expenses are now divided into three. The expenses are divided into three. So you're having the first type of expense, we call them office and administration expenses. Office and administration expenses, that is the first expense. You are also going to learn number two, what we call the selling and distribution. Selling and distribution expenses. That is the second expense. And the third expense that you are going to learn here is what we call the financial charges. Financial charges. So the financial charges, these are the expenses that account for total expenses in the income statement. So with this, when you sum them up, when you get the total of these expenses, the total, when you add all these three, you are going to arrive at total expense, and this total expense is supposed to be subtracted from the gross results that you had obtained. So these gross results I have told you is either an income or a loss. So with this, once you do the subtraction, this less this, you are going to now arrive at your net results. So this is now what we call the net results. This is now what we call the net results, and this net results is either a profit or a loss. So if it is positive, it's a profit. If it is negative, it is a net loss. So that is the end of what we call an income statement. So this is what we call the vertical format of an income statement. So when you're preparing the income statement, if you're provided with the gross profit or the gross results, that is either profit or a loss, you're going to begin it at the start of the income statement. But if you're not given, you are required to determine it if you have the items that are supposed to be posted in the trading account, that is the sales and the purchases. After working the sales and the purchases, then you can post your gross results here. Then you add any gain, that is any gain that is a revenue or income. After adding it to the gross results, then you are going to arrive at another gross income or a gross loss. That results that you get is where you are going to subtract all your expenses. Are we together? So after getting all these types of expenses together, summing them up, and then getting the total expenses, this is now what we call the total expenses. This is what we call the total expenses. So these total expenses, once you subtract them from the gross income or the gross loss, you are going to arrive at either a net profit or a net loss. And with that said, we can now do what we call an example.